Hello everyone, thank you for joining us back again. This next section will be the cross-questioning section. The way this will work is both speakers will be at the podium. We will begin with Mohammed Hijab. He will ask a question. He'll have 1 minute to formulate the question. Edward, you'll have 2 minutes to answer. This will continue until Mohammed has been able to ask 3 questions. Then we will alternate. That means Edward will ask 3 questions. Again, each question will be 1 minute each, and each answer, this time by Mohammed, will be 2 minutes each. So if I can ask both Edward and Mohammed to join me at the podium, or go to the podium. Thank you.
It would be like a duet into the... Just one mic? Okay.
I think I'll go in here as well.
Oh, okay. All right.
Tell me when to start.
Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin from 1950. Okay. I'm the only one old enough to know that joke. Okay.
All right. Do I have a minute? So let me just get my stopwatch on so I know.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay. I was going to say that you touched upon morality, and I think it's an important thing to talk about because I have heard lots of your debates before, and I'm intrigued to hear your answer to this particular question. On naturalism, what scientific explanation can you provide for the existence or the objectivity of morality?
The answer is that I can give a better explanation for morality on atheism than on theism, even if it's not a perfect answer. Because on theism, someone looks into a book and without any proof that God really said it, saying, well, God said it, therefore it must be true regardless of what we think about it, just because God said it, which eclipses human reason. On atheism, what we do is we wrestle it out with our reasoning, and there are a whole avenue of areas by which we can assess morality, and even if they're not perfect, they're more reliable than believing in a deity. For instance, there's consequentialism, the consequences of actions being good or bad. There is the notion that our moral values stem from our biological nature. See, the problem with saying that morality comes from God is circular, because what you're doing is you are positing a God so you can have objective moral values that you can then use to try to show that that God exists. And that is not a valid form of argument.
Thank you for that answer, Eddie. I've got a follow-up question, which is not on that morality thing, on something else, on naturalism. On atheistic naturalism, what scientific experiment would you conduct, for example, or could you refer us to, that tells us about the existence of mathematics? How can you prove mathematics through science?
It's very easy. We prove mathematics empirically. For instance, 2 of one object and 2 of another object equals 4. But what's important about that is so axiomatic that it couldn't be altered. For instance, God couldn't appear right now and say by divine fiat there are 3 debaters standing at the podium, not 2. And so mathematics and logic are actually arguments against the supernatural because they show laws of logic and laws of mathematics that cannot be altered. You see, conceptually, it doesn't even work to say God could make 2 and 2 equals 5. And so on naturalism, we discover the laws of nature. We don't invent them, and they're not prescribed by anybody. So, for instance, we discovered the laws of geometry. Nobody invented them. We discovered the workings of calculus. We discovered the laws of engineering. Nobody invented it that if we put up a building this way, it'll collapse. If we put up a building the other way, it will collapse. We discovered it, just like we discover what medicines work. So therefore, on naturalism, we would expect that these laws could not be altered by anyone, a god or any other type of being.
The issue with that is that, mathematics, the mind, and all those things are first-person inquiries, whereas Science is a third-person inquiry, so it would be very difficult to bridge the gap. But on this point of, once again, on naturalism, I have another question, because you made mention of some historical events. Now, obviously, we both believe in parts of history. For example, we believe in, the slave trade. We believe in the Holocaust. We believe in, things that have happened even all the way back to the prehistoric age. If witness testimony, which is what is required for history to take place, for example, your mother's history of what happened to her, or whatever it may be, how can you legitimize witness testimony on naturalism? And if it's not legitimized, does that mean that we can deny things like slavery, the Holocaust, and so on?
Well, you see, the answer to that is by empirical evidence, we know that certain things can happen. If I said that I flew here on an airplane today, nobody would question it. If I said I just flapped my arms and flew here bodily, you would question it. If I told you that somebody crossed a river to get to the other side, you would accept it. If I told you that somebody was levitated from one side of the river to the other, you wouldn't. This shows that we have an inbuilt already recognition through logic and reason and experience of understanding eyewitness events that are within the realm of what we know to be probable and those which are not. If I said that somebody drove me here tonight for the debate in a car, you would believe me. If I said space aliens picked me up in an interstellar spacecraft and brought me here, you wouldn't believe me. So we shouldn't shy away from the common sense experience that already helps us distinguish the natural from the supernatural.
Thank you.
Okay. Mohammed, I'm handing you
Yes.
5 different translations of Surah 434.
Yes.
Each one talks about men being in charge of women, and there's nothing corresponding about women being in charge of men. And each of the 7 translations from different respected translators of the Quran speak about husbands having the right to, under circumstances of defiance and arrogance, beat their wives. Do you agree or disagree with both men ruling over women in the surah and the permission to beat them as set forth in the surah?
I certainly disagree with the translation, because the word qawwamun in Arabic means maintainers and protectors, and this word qama yaqumu literally means to stand up. And that's why you'll find that the majority of translators translate it like that. As for the verse that talks about daraba, which is the Arabic word, almost there is a consensus among the scholars of Islam that this is not to be in vengeful or attacking or harmful or hurtful action. This is talking about something which is symbolic, and the evidence of that is that the Prophet Muhammad he said, "La darar wa la dirar," that you cannot harm or reciprocate harm. So I think there is a problem here with the understanding of the verse, and also the Prophet said, "La tadribu ima Allah," don't hit the women slaves of Allah, meaning the women. And he said, the worst of you are those who hit the women. And that's why I think if you look at the totality of evidence, then there is a bit more nuance than you think.
Okay. Mohammed, you quoted the Quran a lot tonight. Let me ask you, why is the Quran a more credible final revelation of God, having been dictated to the prophet by the angel Gabriel, than the Book of Mormon as the final revelation of God, having been dictated in the 19th century in upstate New York by the angel Moroni to the prophet Joseph Smith?
The reason why is because the Quran has certain parameters and certain challenges that the Book of Mormon doesn't have. For example, it has the inimitability challenge, it has the preservation challenge. The Quran is the only preserved book. It has predictions that predict the future that couldn't have been known at the time. On probability, we find it very difficult. I'll explain that in the conclusion when I'll give you more expansion on what I'm saying. The Quran has a language that completely descopes the Arabic language of the people of the time, and it was recognized by those linguists as something which was extraordinary. The Quran has a structural feature that even Orientalist scholars like Raymond Farron have looked at and said that this is something which cannot be possible considering the circumstantial revelation of the Quran. So there's many reasons. And I think the main point is the Quran gives us a falsification challenge. And since you're a fan of science, the fact that it gives us a falsification challenge makes it in many ways, quite scientific.
Mohammed, you have many times embraced what we would call the Kalam cosmological argument, the first cause argument. If in fact time and space began with the Big Bang, and if something cannot come from nothing, but God created, Allah created the world ex nihilo, out of nothing, how did an immaterial being with no physical attributes, no physical brain or body, create everything around us in a context where there was no time and space for A to cause B? How did he do it? What was the mechanism by which this immaterial being, without time and space, created time and space and matter?
Well, as the Arabs say, عدم الدليل ليس دليل على العدم. So it's an argument from ignorance. If we don't know how something works, it doesn't mean it's false.